You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network. For more quality options programs, visit www.theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app, available in iTunes and on Google Play. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com.
Join us now for the expert source for inside information on the options markets. It's time for Options Insider Radio with your host, Mark Longo.
Welcome back to Options Insider Radio, the interview program here on the old network where we welcome on guests from throughout the world of options and derivatives and proceed to pick their brains for the benefit of you, the listener. My name is Mark Longo from the optionsinsider.com, as well as, of course, from the aforementioned network, coming to you one last time here from the Options Industry Conference in scenic and sunny Florida. I've been putting together a lot of content for you folks over the last few days. Hopefully you enjoyed it there. We got one more in store for you. He's an old friend of the network coming back on. He is Rob Brogan, the Vice President of Equity Derivative Services over there at FlexTrade. Rob, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me back. It's good to be back again.
How is the world of the flexing of the trades? Are the trades really flexing out there? Is it going well?
Actually, from FlexTrade perspective, it's looking a lot brighter these days. Not that it was ever dim, but people are starting to spend some money on software. People are looking for sophisticated solutions. So it's been very nice over the past 6 months or so. You've seen a big uptick.
I definitely hear what you're saying. Just looking at this conference, it's a different event than it was last year. Last year you were there. It was kind of dire, kind of sad. There's no volume, there's no volatility. What are we going to do? Oh, woe is me. A lot of that. And fast forward a year, and there's volatility again, maybe a little more than people expected, but it's back. And volume up, 30% so far year to date, some ridiculous number. So people are excited about that. There's something actually trading out there again, which is nice. I'm sure, again, for your guys' business, probably a good thing too, particularly, on the risk analytics side, maybe some other things. Now, I'm sure the calls you're making to people maybe pre-February 4th, what do I need enhanced risk for? The market just goes up and there's no volatility. And then after February 5th, they're like, hey, remember you called me about that risk? What do you got in there? So I'm sure that's probably been it's probably maybe a tale of 2 years for you guys, pre-February 5th and after. Have you seen something like that?
Yeah, so we've seen a big uptick in risk, and our analytics package being able to basically run some scenarios as well, and take a look at the risk associated with those scenarios. So risk has been very prominent on the forefront, and it's something that we offer along with our execution package as well. So you can kind of get the complete package, in one application. It's been very good from that perspective. And with regards to risk, people want it in real time. There's a lot of firms out there that'll look at risk on a daily basis or end of day basis, and have all their trades uploaded at the end of the day, and we can provide them that information in real time and let them shock that portfolio in real time, and even run a couple scenarios, and some mock trades and see how they perform and how they'll affect the portfolio, and get a graphic view or just a grid view. Whatever they prefer. So we try to customize the solution to their needs.
I've had a lot of vendors coming through here over the last few days, and it always kind of interests me for guys like you, particularly firms like yours that have the whole suite, the front end all the way to the the back office stuff. You guys put all this work into this, this awesome front end, all this bells and whistles and cool widgets and stuff like that, and then the customer's like, yeah, just give me the API, and that's all I want. Do you guys get a lot of that these days, or is it trending up? And then B, I know you want the client at the end of the day, so you'll take it. But is it kind of frustrating to be like, you put all this work into it, and they're not using it?
So we get a lot of API questions, a lot of looks at APIs. People people like our API. It's very robust. Can both pull and push data, so they can get data out as well as push data in, and well as execute trades. From a perspective of front end, if they don't want a front end, that's okay with me. I don't necessarily need to sell the front end.
You don't feel offended, insulted deep in your core?
Not necessarily. It almost makes it easier to kind of manage the client, right? So if they're doing everything via an API, then there's less work involved. It's easier. I don't want to say there's less things that can go wrong, but it's a lighter lift for us from a support perspective, because if they're using the API, they're writing to our API. We give them a spec, and they kind of manage that solution themselves. So from a support perspective, makes it a lot easier. Do I want them to take a look at what we have on the front end? Obviously, since I've designed half of it. So it makes it nice when somebody takes a look at it and says, wow, this looks great. This does exactly what I wanted. That's a good attaboy for me, but I'll take either. So
if they look at it and say this is garbage, and that you're deeply personally offended because that's all your code and design work there, Rob. You say, get out of my office. But it's interesting. You mentioned the support issue is an interesting one, not one that I've heard before. So that kind of makes it interesting. But of course, seeing this kind of this marketplace that we're in right now, with everyone loving to input, and you and I have talked before, kind of offline about this. But it's kind of interesting to see, particularly for you guys, the vendors, just how hard it is to get onto the screens these days. I mean, if your typical trader has 27 screens, something along those lines, and yet they still maintain they have no space for any sort of new thing right there. So if a firm like yours approaches a guy like that and says, hey, use our stuff, and you don't have the API, right, then it's probably a no deal to begin with, right? Because that's the only way they'll really even entertain stuff these days, a lot of these traders out there. So there's some that, only want to use an API because it's just easier for them, and it's not a heavy lift. But again, screen real estate becomes very precious as far as a trader goes. I've been into trading shops where I've seen widescreen televisions covering an entire wall, and they're monitoring them all. And I don't really understand how one trader can monitor so many screens, but they seem to have a knack for it, and they seem to know where to look when they want to look for stuff. They have raging ADD. That's what it is. And what we've tried to do to make it easier for them is to really just give them the ability to kind of, dock windows wherever they need to dock windows. So, instead of putting, multiple sections into one window, give them the ability to kind of undock that window and just really use the screens that they want to use and put them in specific locations and let them customize the look and feel of the application. So from that perspective, I think we've done a pretty good job of giving them the ability to look at what they want to look at and what's pertinent to them, and not have to look at other stuff that they might consider fluff. Obviously, we're down here at the Options Industry Conference. A lot of topics are being bandied about here over this week, including liquidity and the issues kind of therein. You interact with a lot of the end users, the traders, and those people who are on the kind of the front lines of that liquidity battle, if you will. I'm curious, what are you hearing from those guys you're talking to? Are they kind of lamenting that things are kind of difficult out there from an execution perspective? And if so, what do you think, maybe firms like yours and vendors can do to maybe somewhat mitigate that problem? So from a liquidity perspective, you always hear about liquidity as a problem. Liquidity is this, it's fragmented, and so on and so forth. And customers, it depends on what they're trading, right? They're trading, top 20, then liquidity is not as much of an issue. Fragmentation can be an issue, still a strong upstairs community too. So they're, the high size trades, I guess we could say, are really traded up there. There's some that will use kind of like a gamma weighted average or kind of TWAP it across the day to try and get liquidity. What we've done to try and battle with a liquidity perspective, since we're broker neutral, we have access to a number of different brokers, access to a number of different algos with those brokers, and we can provide TCA so the customer can kind of see, kind of where they're executing, where they're getting the most liquidity. And then we've introduced on the equity side, and we're starting to introduce on the option side, the concept of an algo wheel. So
That'll take a number of inputs that you can input or the trader can input with regards to selecting an algo or selecting the best algo for a specific symbol. It'll also combine your TCA as well with that. So if you're using our TCA package, we can combine that information there as well. So you can kind of find out which broker is providing the most liquidity, what algo is giving you the most liquidity or giving you the access to most liquidity, and then kind of have it set up. So anytime you bring up a specific symbol, automatically routes to that broker, to that algo, so you can kind of pull the liquidity out that you want to pull out, and kind of find it or search for it using some kind of advanced analytics.
Essentially, you mentioned the TCA component, because I think that's kind of an underserved area. We don't have a lot of vendors come in here talking about their awesome front ends or their APIs or all their back office and risk analytics and all these other cool things. You don't have a lot of them really, I can't think of really any of them talking, TCA as being a part of their combined offering. Certainly an underserved area from the options component where you probably need it the most, right? Things are fragmented. There's so many series. Getting good your execution and analytics on that side is a hard thing. So are you seeing a big uptick in the usage of the TCA?
So TCA is relatively new in the options space, and really because I don't think individuals know what metrics they want or what to base it against, because there's no VWAP, so you can't base against that. But you can bench it against your arrival price and see exactly how you performed and take a look at slippage and things along those lines. In addition to that, you can kind of see where you're getting your liquidity. Which broker is giving you the best fills or which broker is routing your order the best and getting to market the quickest. So you're grabbing more liquidity. So from that perspective, you can get a number of metrics. We'd like to expand, but we kind of don't know where to go other than those areas. And again, we'll let the customers drive that. If the customers have ideas or the customers want to expand on TCA, then we can certainly do so. But again, it's really the metrics, and they differ from the equity space because of, number one, all the strikes, and that's another thing that was brought up at the conference. Look at all of these strikes, and I think a total of 10% of the strikes that are listed actually trade.
Surprise is that high.
But and again, I think it's 900,000 strikes or something that are listed out there, and 10% of those trade. So from a data perspective, or from a TCA perspective, it's not as easy on the option side as it is on the equity, because you really have an equity, you have locations, you have algos, and you can take a look at all of that information and look at a VWAP and because it's always trading. On the option side, you have those strikes that are not trading. So from that perspective, we welcome any new ideas, but we do have some TCA available as far as benching, as far as algo, and where you're getting your best fills and your best execution.
The strikes and the quotes thing is something that we've talked about on this network and on our shows for years at a conference like this, but it's never been that broadly discussed. And it seems like this year it's finally starting to reach that critical mass. Exchanges have been in here talking about it and supporting it. OCC was in here talking about it and supporting maybe delisting or RFQing some of these less traded series. So it seems like finally there is some sort of critical mass to say, you know what? Not everything needs to be listed and updated all the time and penny-wide, and maybe we're doing a disservice to ourselves, let alone the customer, by doing this. And so it's finally, it's taken the penny pilot's been around longer than the options insider, and yet these things and these proliferation of strikes and everything, people are finally starting to perhaps realize that at the end of the day, more is not necessarily better. Certainly for you guys, that'd be a good thing to delist some of that, make your TCA, and just make your general data load a lot easier to manage. So I'm sure you as a vendor, you're probably first in line to say, hey, get rid of half of that. We don't need it.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind getting rid of half of that, because the data that you have to provide as an options vendor, the data that you need to provide, and the real-time data that you need to provide, and the real-time quotes that you need to provide, has to be real time, and to do that, it's a heavy lift, and you need to structure it properly so that it updates dynamically, it doesn't freeze, and you don't have issues with your data. So less data is always better. It allows you to do calculations quickly, because there's a lot of derived data that comes from that as well. So if you're calculating volatilities, you're calculating volatilities based off of real-time data. And if you're calculating volatilities on every strike that's listed, it's pretty heavy memory footprint. So from that perspective, yeah, I'd like to see some of them delisted. I don't know about the whole RFQ. I get it, and I can understand that. But from that perspective, people love the markets because they're transparent. Having to do an RFQ is not necessarily a transparent marketplace. I'd be open to entertain the thought, but I think if somebody really wants to have something listed, they can have it listed. There's plenty of flex options out there, so if there's something that's not listed, hey, quote a flex and find out where the market is and what the market center wants to do. But I definitely think that we can get by with a few less strikes.
It seems like RFQ is kind of a nice half step for people who are scared of the delisting scares them. Oh, we don't want to remove choices for the customers. So RFQ, it still exists, but you're not quoting it all the time. So it seems like maybe that's the half measure people need to get something done. Which, if that's the case, I can get behind it. If it's that or more of this, that's probably the best of
Understood.
the best of the choices.
And really, I think it should be done at OCC level, because as been discussed, I don't think strikes are a competitive advantage for any exchange. Every exchange is going to, any strike that's listed, any exchange is going to list them. If they delist them, the exchanges delist them. So if you put it in OCC's hands and let them determine what the strike should be, and let's start out with 10% around the money. Let's see what happens. I don't know what the real answer is. I haven't dug deep enough into it to figure that out. But I definitely think it should be kind of at an OCC level, and let them dictate or mandate what the parameters should be with regards to.
And they seem finally willing maybe to take those steps, which is kind of a good thing. So some good happening at the conference here this year. Speaking of good, let's wrap things up on a good note here, Rob. You kind of touched on some of the stuff you guys are working on. Maybe leave us with a little bit of a hint, a little bit of a tease of what's coming down the pike from FlexTrade these days.
So basically, the Algo Wheels has been a pretty big hit, and allows customers to kind of custom design and not have to think about things when they're trading. We're doing a lot of pre and post trade analytic work. We've also branched into the predictive analytic work as well, and really it's more so on the equity side, but hoping to branch into the option side as well. But it also helps kind of with an underlying hedge on your option trade. So if you're looking to do an underlying hedge, and we're kind of predicting more volume related information. So when's the most volume available within the marketplace? So if you've got 100,000 shares to get done, when can you get that done, and when's the best time of day, or when's the market most liquid? So that's been pretty good. And then we put in a new product, Flex Now, which is really a multi-asset product, multi-asset EMS that's can be deployed relatively quickly. It's an out-of-the-box solution, and it's hosted by us. Because what we've also noticed over the past, I'd say, year and a half, 2 years, is most clients want a hosted solution. They don't want that heavy lift on their side. So we're trying to cater to what the market wants and what the market needs. Of course, we still have our customized solutions. It's kind of our bread and butter. What we do and how we do it, and give the customer a bespoke solution so they can get done what they want to get done and have it work the way that they want it to work. So from that perspective, we're there too. So I mean, they're kind of the things that we've been working on. OEMS too. So combining our OMS product with our EMS product and giving them an out-of-the-box solution there too, because customers don't want to manage as much on the vendor side. Like they don't want to have an EMS. They don't want to have an OMS and have two different vendors that they have to have a relationship with. They'd rather, at least this is what we've been finding, they'd rather just have one, and manage that. But it needs to be robust. And I think we've proven that we are fairly robust.
You've certainly been around for a while, so that at least proves the robustness, right? You survived a few shocks to the system, and you're still out there flexing trades to this day, Rob. So great catching up with you here at the old show, and look forward to seeing how all these new initiatives and the TCA and everything else you're working on over there at FlexTrade plays out in the marketplace in the coming months.
Thanks, sir. It's great to be here back.
The preceding program was a production of the Options Insider Radio Network. For more quality options programs, visit www.theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app, available in iTunes and on Google Play. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com.